I inspire business people, it makes me happy. When I inspire high school students, it makes me delighted. So raise your hands or clap. How many of you are citizens of Google? How many of you belong to the Federation of Facebook? How many of you pledge allegiance to the Republic of Apple? I'm a citizen of Google. I'm a citizen of Facebook. I'm a citizen of Apple. I know what some of you are thinking. The professor needs a geography lesson. We've heard that schooling is bad in America, but they're mixing up digital platforms with countries. I mean, this is just too much. The reason why I'm making this analogy is that citizenship is the way to be thinking about our relationship with these platforms. They're not just bigger than the largest nation-states the world has ever seen. They are the governments of the future. So let me explain how platforms are starting to take on some of the roles that governments historically played. Let's start with censorship. Who filters out fake news from real news, suppresses hate speech, filters out porn? It's not the censor bureau that's doing the work anymore. It's the algorithms of YouTube and Facebook. Surveillance. Apple and Airtel, Google and Vodafone, they see it all. Where we are, where we say we are, sometimes a different thing. Who we talk to, what we say. Your Amazon Echo, that digital foot soldier in your living room, hears it all. Currency. Money used to be exclusively backed by a nation state. Today, you have Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Ripple backed by code and a crowd. So censorship, surveillance, currency, the list actually goes on. Apple and Amazon licenses are becoming more important than copyright law. Your Facebook ID is used more frequently than your government ID. When a hurricane wiped out cell phone service in a Caribbean island, Google restored service, not the US Army. Platforms are even becoming gatekeepers to essential real-world services, accommodation, education, transportation. A lot of you took an Ola cab to get here, right? Even the way that we perceive physical reality is starting to be shaped by platforms. I mean, today we have our smartphones with us. In 10 years, it'll be the iPhone 20 and Google Glass 10. What we see in physical space will be digitally augmented. Have you seen those kids running into traffic because of Pokemon Go? Folks, that's just the beginning. But the government still has a monopoly over violence, right? Google and Facebook aren't actually going to assemble physical armies or private police forces the way the British East India Company did. No? You have to think differently about this. Think Russia and the US election. Think North Korea and those WannaCry hacker ads. Cyber warfare is the future of armed conflict. You don't need smart bombs anymore. You need smart hackers. You don't need military intelligence anymore. You need artificial intelligence. And who has the best AI? It's Facebook, it's Google, it's Apple, it's Amazon, it's Tencent. Guess who's going to be in charge? So I want to step back a moment now and start to think about what kind of institutions these platforms are going to evolve into. So I'm going to take you from geography class now to civics class, where we learned about all those different government forms and how to recognize what a democracy is. So how many of you have voted in an election about Apple's privacy policy? Have you ever been to a Google Court of Appeals? Do you even know what YouTube's censorship laws are? Do they apply equally to everybody? Do you own your Facebook data? Listen, I'm not selling a conspiracy theory here or the Matrix is everywhere. I mean, platforms, of course, have really good intentions. It's just that they're not democracies. They're more like benevolent dictatorships. And so at Davos last month, George Soros called on us to regulate the platforms. But one government can't regulate another government. Perhaps we have to think about treaties then. This is probably what Denmark is thinking. They've actually appointed an ambassador to Silicon Valley. But while he is working out the trade agreements, what I want us to work out and think about is democratic reform. This is the goal of a project I'm leading for my World Economic Forum Global Future Council, creating a blueprint for platform governance, a digital Bill of Rights. The first right is transparency. Platforms must be open about how they filter our content, how they censor us, and how they target us. I mean, we wouldn't have actually clicked on those fake news stories if they were coming from a tiny town, if we knew that they were coming from a tiny town in Macedonia, right? And so openness could have helped prevent some of the world events that were shaped by fake news recently. Because echo chambers aren't new. We have always lived in them with friends, family, grandparents, villagers, neighborhoods, reinforcing our beliefs. But digital echo chambers are opaque. This makes them susceptible to insidious infiltration. Those are my Shashi Tharoor words for today. So what I mean is that strangers can enter these echo chambers, sort of manipulate our opinions and outcomes, and we don't even realize it. Transparency is part of the solution, so I want you guys to insist on it. Okay? The second right, algorithmic fairness. If an algorithm decides what content we see, what transportation we get, what college we get admission into, what education we receive, what job we get, whether we get a bank loan, what medical treatment we receive, what prison sentence is meted out, this algorithm must not be prejudiced. Democracies work really hard to make sure that their laws and institutions are free from discrimination and bias. Platforms need to do the same. It is a fundamental part of any reasonable social contract, and you have to insist on it. The third right, data property rights. I mean, we don't really think about this too much, but someone can't just sort of grab your stuff, run away, and say, this is mine. I mean, all of you bought your own TEDxGateway ticket, right? You didn't just snatch it from someone, put on a fake mustache, and then show up at the door. If you did, now is the time to stand up, and we have a place for you in the corner on the left. But we take these individual property rights for granted, the ability to buy, own, and sell. In contrast, whatever you create on a platform is owned by the platform. So here's a first step forward. Allow platform users to own their data and create a system for licensing this data. I know that this sounds complicated, but you know what else is complicated? Music is property. After I buy a song, do I own it? Or is it the person who's singing it, or the person who wrote it? We have solved these problems through innovations like copyright law. We can do the same for data property rights. Insist on it. 4, user-inclusive decisions. Today, platform decisions are made by the CEO, by the board, by the shareholders, by the government regulators, by revenue goals, by what the engineers pretend is feasible or not feasible. Platforms also need to create ways in which users can participate directly in decision-making about what affects, especially, the sociology of the platform. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting that every decision made by every platform is voted on by every user, like they did back in sort of democratic Athens. Although if you think about it, that might be a better use of our time than participating in another which Game of Thrones character are you quiz. We could, in this world, make BuzzFeed the official election authority. So, seriously, platforms, democracy has evolved a lot since Athens. We have all kinds of forms. We've got parliamentary, we've got presidential, we've got representative. We've got blockchain technology now that can easily implement distributed governance. Surely we can make user-inclusive decisions a reality if you insist on it. Finally, due process. If your credit score is compromised, if in the future your online work history is manipulated somehow, there has to be a way for you to seek recourse with advance notice, a fair hearing, the attributes of a good justice system. We need this. Insist on it. So, remember how the British government disbanded the East India Company following the War of 1857? So I've now taken you from civics class to history class. So I've covered the social science, the social studies triumvirate. We heard from all these scientists in the morning. I've always felt the social studies is sort of the stepchild of middle school, so I wanted to give it some prominence at the event. But the reason why I'm talking about history is that I'm a big believer in learning from history. And much like the Crown disbanded the British East India Company, I think governments in the future are going to try and reclaim the power that they have ceded to the platforms. And I don't want to wait, and we shouldn't wait until war breaks out between a major platform and a major government. So what we have to remember is that without our attention, without our participation, without our engagement, without our cooperation, these platforms don't have a business. We have more leverage than we think. So favor the platforms that adopt this Bill of Rights. Withdraw from the ones that don't. Inspire those around you to do the same. Because we are at a moment in history where we have a real opportunity to design the digital worlds that are forming to be places that we actually want to live. We have to do this because if we don't, someone else will design them for us, and we may not like the design that we end up with. So insist on it, design your own reality, take control, democratize your platforms. Thank you.